I don't know.
I'll watch my mouth.
That's our great introduction to WP Roundtable. Another great episode with another great guest. He's going to watch his mouth today. And I'm Jason Crawford, coming to you from Medellin, Colombia. Yeah. Somebody go next.
I'll dive in next. Good start to the show, Jace. I am Kellen Mace. I'm a freelance dev from Metro Detroit area in Michigan. Soon to be 10 upper in a couple weeks, actually. Glad to be on tonight with an awesome guest. Mark, next.
Hi, I'm Mark. I'm new here, and I'm with ServerPress, and we make cool things.
Darn right. All right. My name's Kyle, and I'm from Jackson, Michigan. I love WordPress and plugins and homebrewed beer and things of that nature. And our guest is phenomenal today for episode 51. Really, really excited. Somebody that I've wanted on the show since long before we ever started the show or even thought of having a show. Always thought, wow, how cool would that be to talk to Brad Williams of WebDev Studios. So, Brad, can you take just a quick moment and just tell everyone who you are and what you do?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me on. I'm Brad Williams. I founded a company called WebDev Studios back in 2008. We built a lot of really cool stuff on WordPress. I've written a couple WordPress books. I do a little podcast called the Dradcast. I have another company called AppPresser. I run the Philly WordPress meetup group. I do a lot with WordPress. It's almost a sickness at this point, but I'm enjoying it. So.
Yeah. Well, that's a great sickness, and we hope you don't find a cure.
And last but not least, what are you sipping on?
Oh man, I'm lame. I'm sipping on water.
Wow.
Terrible.
Oh, that is terrible.
But you guys got some home brews, so I want to know what you were sipping on.
We don't have the sound effect. Apologies.
No, but this homebrew is not bad. I made this a few months ago. It's what is it? It's a raspberry honey brown ale, which is kind of weird, kind of an odd mix, but it turned out okay. Just saying.
Very cool. I love the homebrews.
So, yeah, homebrewing is the bomb. We'll talk more about that later. I hope so, because I've got a lot of questions about that. That's what I really want to know about. But before we get to the questions and learn more about Brad Williams, we're going to do our quick picks of the week. This is part of the show where every one of us talks about something relevant, something that we want to share with our audience, one new thing that we found. So mine real quick, I just want to encourage people to go check out the Facebook group that Dre Armada's got for the weekly blog post challenge. I'll drop a link in the event and in the show notes and stuff like that, but I think I'm going to jump on board and join this weekly post challenge, and it's a great feed as I was checking it out of everyone sharing their weekly blog posts that they've been writing. And there's a lot of good stuff going on. It's a really cool way to encourage everybody to keep turning out great WordPress-related content. So that's me.
I'm going to jump in real quick, and I'm going to cover, this is going to be mine for 2 weeks, I think. Animaker. It's just a really cool little video animated video maker. It's made some updates. They're in a new beta version, so I'm checking it out. I'm going to play with it this week, and so next week I think my quick pick will be actually a review of how it went. So that's it. We'll drop the link in the show notes, and yep.
All right, Jace. I'll dive in next. I thought in honor of our guest I would plug something on WebDev Studios blog. That is a post by Brad Parves called Getting Started with Vagrant in VVV. Anybody not using it to the developer, highly recommend you check out Vagrant and VVV specifically. And also, the reason I was turned on to this article in particular was just because I switched from using Allison Barrett's site wizard for VVV. I didn't know for a long time that Brad had kind of built on top of that and developed his own. He forked it. So his is called, Variable VVV. So check that out if you have a chance. Just github.com/bradp/vv. So it's a kind of more robust, more powerful, VVV site creation wizard that I've been getting into. So check it out.
I guess I'll go next. So I just discovered this today, and when I say I just discovered it, it's because my partner Greg showed it to me, and it looks kind of cool. And it's a brand new plugin. It's called MP Customizer Backups. And if any of you ever use a theme that has customization capabilities, and then you go and you save them, and then you switch out to another theme, and then you come back, and all your settings are lost, this is a plugin that'll save all your things with just a click. So it looks brand new, but it looks kind of cool. I know that I've run into that a few times in the past when I was doing a lot of dev work, and I might just mess with it just for the fun of it. And it's on the repository. It's free, so that's cool too.
These are great picks. I might have to steal a few for the Dradcast.
Brad, you have something to share?
I do. Real quick point on to Kellen's mention of the post Brad put on our blog.
Mm-hmm.
We've been having all of our team members write blog posts. So if you go to our blog, they've been pumping out some really amazing content. And it's all under, I think, the employee post category. And you can kind of look at all those, but it's just been some really amazing content coming out about some really interesting topics across the board, design, dev, and server, and everything. So I've been really impressed with what the team's been putting out. But I have a plugin I'll share, and actually I got turned on to this plugin at WordCamp London, and it's called Multilingual Press. I wrote about it on my blog for the weekly post challenge, which I'm failing at miserably, but I'll keep at it. But it's really cool. So we do a lot of like multilingual setups with WordPress, and our general go-to kind of setup is to run a multi-site network with each site in the network being a different language. It works really well. Gives you kind of that control you need so that different groups can control the different sites and content. But the biggest challenge we've had is there's no real relationship between the content and the sites. So if you have an about page in English on site 1 and about page in German on site 2, there's no connection between the two. Well, this fixes it, and it makes a connection there. So you can kind of edit all your content in one spot, and it will update all the appropriate content across the network in the different languages. And it makes it super easy to obviously switch between the languages because it has that relationship built in. So it's a really slick plugin. It's on WordPress.org. It's on GitHub, and they have a pro version, which I heard they're going to roll out on GitHub and release for free, and just do premium support. So it's really slick. You should check it out if you do anything with multilingual stuff in WordPress.
Well, I do. So I've just got a quick question for you. Have you used WPML, and how would you compare this?
Yeah, WPML works very well. Some of the challenges we've ran into is scaling with WPML, and that if you have a site with just millions of records, trying to kind of house that all in one site can get a bit unruly. Plus, it's having the granular control of having separate sites in the network and just using, this is just like core WordPress multi-site, like just having certain users on one site and different users on another site, just out of the box works really well. And there's certainly ways you can do that with WPML using different roles and permissions, but it's more work, right? It's more work to do that. So and our, with the setups we've been doing recently, the network setup's been a real winner for us.
All right, excellent. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Brad. That's a good pick. All right, so we want to jump into learning more about you, and this is pretty exciting. We've got a ton of questions that we want to go through about a lot of different topics because, just as you mentioned in your intro, you're involved in quite a lot of different things, and we've had guests on the podcast before where we talk pretty much just about organizing a WordCamp, or just about organizing a meetup, or just about writing a book, and running a business, or all of these things, and you're involved in all of them. So you have to be a little picky about what we talk about today in our limited time. So I'd like to, if we could, kind of set the stage a little bit. If you could give us a little background. You're somebody who's on the air a lot with your podcast as well, and we see you all the time, but we don't get your story as much. And so for anybody watching, maybe you can walk us through a little bit. Maybe at least like the past 10 years or so of how you kind of got into WordPress, how you started a business, how you decided you're the guy to write a book about WordPress and things like that.
Sure. So let's see, 10 years ago, man, that's 2005. It doesn't feel like 10 years ago, but I guess it was. So I kind of talk about, I guess, where WebDev kind of stemmed from. So right out of high school, I graduated in '99. I joined the United States Marine Corps. I was never a great, I never really enjoyed school. It was always kind of like just do enough to get by. But the classes I did really enjoy were anything related to computers. So if there was computers involved, I loved it. I would ace it. I just ate it up. Everything else I really didn't care about. So I knew like college probably wasn't going to work out that well because there's certainly some other classes outside of computers I would probably have to take. So I went in the Marine Corps, figured I would do that, try it out. I actually was a Marine Corps programmer, believe it or not. So they had those at the time. So I actually learned, I had done development prior to that, but I really learned kind of the understanding and knowledge of how to work with like database-driven websites. And this was about 2000, so this is this is pre-WordPress by a little bit. Hello. It's not me. No. So in the Marine Corps, building websites, kind of getting some good knowledge, and that's where I met Brian Messeliner, who I founded WebDev Studios with. We met in programming school in the Marines, and we were stationed together. So we were together pretty much the whole time we were stationed in North Carolina. We did a tour over in Iraq. Together the whole time. So when we got out in 2003, and we knew like eventually we actually had already started WebDev Studios kind of unofficially in the Marine Corps. Just it wasn't a legit company. We were literally just doing like little odds and ends sites on the weekends for people. But we knew we liked it. It was kind of we both really enjoyed it. But we also knew we were still kind of young. We didn't have a lot of experience outside of the military. So we decided let's go out, kind of get established in our own careers. Learn as much as we can, and then when the timing's right, let's get back together and do this full time. And so that's what we did. So we got out of the Marines in 2003, and in 2008, the timing was pretty good. So he actually lived in New Jersey. I picked up, sold my house, put my house on the market, and moved out to New Jersey to start WebDev Studios full time. It was looking back, it was insane because that's right when like the whole economy went in the tank. Housing market crashed right when I put my house up for sale. Jobs were just everybody was losing their jobs, and here we are trying to start a company with almost no money. But it actually, surprisingly enough, it actually worked out in our favor because a lot of people started contacting us wanting to try things, kind of diversify their investments. Maybe throw a little bit of money at this a website idea they might have had for a few years and see if it can maybe pay off. So business started pretty well. That's kind of how we started WebDev Studios. Literally just two guys around a coffee table, building out some websites. So that's kind of I guess catches up to where we started WebDev. When we started WebDev, we were doing a little bit of WordPress, but not that much. We were just kind of getting into open source, and we did a lot with Drupal too. And so we decided let's be a development shop that just focuses on open source. Like we'll just work on open source, whatever it is, as long as it's open source, we'll work on it. At the time, we would just take whatever, any job we could get. Obviously, being a startup with no money, we didn't have any loans or funding or any kind of cash. It was literally like whatever we made is what we made, right? So we would pretty much do anything as long as it was legal. And then we started getting pretty good at WordPress, and this was like 2008, end of 2008, early 2009. It wasn't. When I tell people the story, like a lot of people think, oh yeah, WordPress, that's obvious, but it wasn't the dominant thing that it was now back then. It was popular, but it was popular for blogs, and that's all people really look at it for. So a lot of the sites we were doing early on were blogs. And then we just got really good at WordPress, and we decided, you know what, why be mediocre at a lot of platforms? Why not just be amazing at one? And that's what we decided, 100% WordPress, and we started doing that beginning of 2010. We went 100% WordPress, and from there, we just kept growing.
Wow, that's a pretty remarkable story, and sounds like quite a ride. Going through all that, starting the business at that time, things like that. I'd love to know maybe a little bit more about some of the early projects that you were involved in, and what you were doing to get these clients, especially at that time. What kind of clients were you attracting? What kind of projects were you doing? What sort of businesses were you serving? And just what did that look like, especially in the early days, before you started the business and when you decided to do so?
Yeah, I mean, early days, nobody knew who we were, obviously. Didn't really have a presence online, in search engines. Didn't have a name for ourselves. So a lot of the early jobs that we got were local jobs or through people we knew, with introductions. So it was a lot of local clients, small businesses in the towns in and around where we were at. A few people found us online as we started kind of getting our website and blogging kind of early on, but it wasn't. It was a very, very small percentage of what we had. So it was really just like meeting people in the community, getting referrals, talking to people, getting in front of people, and just kind of selling ourselves. I mean, and back then, you know, we had to sell WordPress because people didn't know. They were like, "Oh, I don't know what that, you know, what is that WordPress?" Or maybe they've heard of it, but they're like, "Yeah, that's for blogs." So you know, the first thing we had to do was kind of sell them on using WordPress, and then sell them on, you know, using us and WordPress. You know, so it was much more difficult back then for sure. But that's what it was, just you know, making connections, talking to people, and getting in front of people, and just making them understand we can do whatever it is they want. And if we can't do it, we'll figure it out. And being smaller, you can you're able to work more deals. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to go in probably at $200 or $300 an hour when you're like a one-man shop. Maybe you are once you're established and you have that kind of portfolio and reputation. Absolutely, you could charge that. But if you don't have that, if you don't have that reputation, you don't have the portfolio, you really can't charge that. So you're able to go after smaller jobs. You know, $1,000. You know, we were perfectly happy building $1,000 websites when we first started. That was a good project for us. You know, we were very happy with that. So you know, you start small, you just hustle, and then and things just started to grow as WordPress grew, really.
Hey, Brad, when you started and you started growing, and it was more than just the two of you, and you started getting more into the kind of the distributed team approach and whatnot. What kind of growing pains did you go through in that process, and how do you handle it now as opposed to then?
Yeah, good question. So when we first started, we were local, and so we started working with local people. We actually started with interns, and this is I gave a presentation in London about kind of starting web dev and the how we got from, like, you know, being a startup to where we're like hiring people, and then things to consider when you're hiring. And one of the first things we did was work with some local colleges to get interns, because we didn't have any money, you know, and we didn't really have any jobs. So you know, you can't really hire people on a salary if you don't have any money to pay them. So we got interns. We were like, oh, interns are fairly inexpensive or free. Generally, they're free, and they're doing it because they need to and they want to. They want the experience, and it's for a class. You know, they get graded. And we did that for a few semesters, and it worked really well. You know, so we had the interns working with us. They were learning, we were learning. We were kind of all learning together because we weren't WordPress experts at the time. So we were all kind of learning together. And then what was kind of neat about that is, once, you know, there's a couple interns that we had that when they graduated, we had grown to the point where we were able to hire them as a contractor. And it was just hourly, you know, it wasn't full-time. It was just whatever we had. But, you know, we usually had at least 20 hours a week for them. So it kind of turned into a full-time job or a part-time job for a couple of our interns, which is kind of cool. We quickly, as we started growing, we quickly ran into the issue. We were in Belmar, New Jersey, which is like a shore town in Jersey. The problem is there's not a lot of tech talent in that area. Like, you know, New York City and Philly are just a little bit too far. People aren't going to commute an hour to go work some part-time job at a tech startup, you know, in a Jersey Shore, one they've never heard of. So we were really kind of limited on who we could go after. So once we got to a certain, you know, after we had a couple hires and the market there was kind of tapped out, we just couldn't find anybody, we just started posting online. We kind of started in like New York and Philly area, so they were semi-close to us, but knowing that they wouldn't be coming into the office. And you know, what we quickly realized is by not basing our hires on location, we could really go after the talent. So we could hire people that already knew what we needed them to know when they started versus us having to train them. Because early on when we hired a few people, they were devs or designers, but they didn't know WordPress. So there was a lot of kind of training, and that's much easier when you're in person, obviously. When you're remote, doing training is much, much harder. So we could go after people that knew WordPress, at least to a certain extent, or knew design very well, you know, front-end dev. So then we said, all right, well, let's just go remote. You know, we were working on the house anyway, so we just started hiring on remote, and it quickly kind of spread, and we quickly stopped worrying about time zones in terms of the U.S., and now we're in 17 states. It's certainly changed now because early on, if you lose somebody, it can have a serious impact on your company. If you're 4 people and somebody leaves, that can have a huge impact on a small startup. You know, we've had issues just like everybody else. We've had, you know, bumps in the road. We've had people that didn't work out. We've had people that just disappeared or you know, were kind of wasting their time on the clock and not actually getting stuff done, or even maybe overselling their skills, so they weren't really as good as what they looked on paper. And some of that stuff, you learn by going through it, and working through it and know what to look for so it doesn't happen again. So as you get bigger and have more employees, it's, if somebody were to leave or whatever, it's not as big of a hit. It certainly isn't great. You don't want it to happen, but it's not like it's going to bring the house of cards crumbling down,
Yeah. Brad, I'll dive in next here. Just listening to you talk about web dev, I'm thinking about and wondering how it's structured. We've had a few folks on from other, especially some of the larger, VIP and other agencies, and kind of gotten their setup for which roles are involved and whether they're broken down into smaller teams, subgroups, pods, whatever you call them. What does web dev look like at this stage?
Yeah. So good question. We don't have pods. We have teams, which are the exact same thing.
Yeah. Right.
We actually talked about that. What do we want to call our teams? And we landed on teams. So
yeah.
I thought maybe there was a better, more clever term, but no, we ended up on teams. But yeah, so currently we have 3 teams. We have 32 employees altogether, including myself. On the exec team,
Mm-hmm.
There's 32 of us. We have 3 teams, and it works really well because we have 2 project-based teams, and then we have a support and maintenance team. Which is basically Maintain. Maintain's a company that we acquired last fall, and it's a funny story because it kind of spun out of WebDev and now came back into WebDev.
Yeah.
But essentially, Maintain is set up to kind of support the ongoing maintenance, things like updating WordPress, updating plugins, taking those routine backups, and even if you have an automated backup system, verifying that the backups are there. So, making sure everything's secure and doing those scans and checking those logs. And they're very good at doing kind of the hourly type of work, maybe a 30-minute task here, a 2-hour task there. The beauty of having a third support team like Maintain as one of our teams versus the other 2 teams, are very much project-based, project-focused with, milestones and schedules across multiple clients and projects. It's very hard for them to kind of drop everything because there's an emergency over here with this other client. When they have, it's Thursday and they have a deliverable Friday, and they have to drop everything to go fix some kind of fire on another project, that just totally screwed up that milestone. So they can't pivot as easily because they're just not structured, and they shouldn't need to, right? So being able to define that third team with Maintain really filled a gap that we were having, where Maintain can pivot all day long. They're structured to pivot. Based on the priority and based on the severity of whatever the issue is. So that setup, I think, has worked very, very well for us. The teams is something we actually we haven't had teams for that long. It's been about a year now. We actually got into teams later than we should have. I want to say we were over 20 people before we broke up into 2 teams, which was a bit ridiculous. We should have done that earlier. And now, as we grow, we'll look to introduce additional teams, but it works very well. One thing I remember when we first talked about, like, company culture is very, very big for me. I want to make sure that people enjoy coming into work. They enjoy the people they're working with. They don't feel like it's a hostile environment. They're having fun. I want people to enjoy coming to work on Monday versus dreading it. I mean, I've worked in some very hostile work environments. Military is a good example. Hostile in the sense of it's aggressive, right? People are going to be yelling at you. It just happens. I've been down that road. I've done that, and I didn't want to have a company like that. So my concern with breaking up into teams is if you would start to lose, there would be a disconnect between the teams. And because they wouldn't be talking to each other as much. So we're very conscious of that. We make sure to always have events and things that we do that are company-wide. We do a company-wide scrum at the end of every week. So everybody gets to see each other at least once a week on video. We do a yearly get-together for the whole company where we all get together for about a week. We shut the office for a week and get together and do kind of, just hang out, get to know each other on a more personal level versus always just working together, Yeah. So things like that. We get together at work camps. We hang out at work camps. It's a lot of fun. So that's, but it's worked well. We haven't lost that company culture. We have some really great teams. They really gel and work well together. And it's a smart move as you start getting bigger.
Well, that's very cool. Well, web dev is very well respected, and I think what you're doing is going a long way from what I hear.
Thanks.
So, yeah. Next question I have. is related to what sets WebDev Studios apart. Especially from some of the, again, VIP agencies or larger agencies. If this is a client, let's say it's one of those large enterprise clients, and they're thinking about going with your agency versus others, or maybe they went through WordPress.com VIP and now are being referred out to one of the agencies.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think your agency's strengths are? What can you do best for clients? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's one I get asked a lot from potential leads. Like, why are you the best? Because we're obviously the best. I mean, come on, you should know that. That's usually not the best answer to that question. But yeah, I think one thing that really sets us apart is we absolutely love building. I guess building things outside the box of what you would expect WordPress to be or to do. If somebody comes to our doorstep and has something we've never built, or let alone never seen built, that is something I will do everything I can to land that project, because we really, really like kind of building things that are a bit crazy, and kind of push the boundaries, if you will, with WordPress. We built this really cool, it was an app for the YMCA that was all powered by WordPress. It ran on an iPad, which was essentially, it had an app wrapper around a website, was really all it was. Mm-hmm. But what it allowed, it was, the YMCA's in New York City. It allowed the kids to come in, and they were issued special cards, and they could hold up their card. I think it was their membership card. They could hold up their card to the iPad, and it would actually scan the barcode and pass that to WordPress, and then WordPress would log them in, and they could track all the activities they were doing. So if they swam for 15 minutes or played basketball for an hour, or ran or jogged or whatever it was, they could track all that, and they got points. The whole idea is to make it more, it's a gamification of excuse me, of working out. So getting kids more active, wanting them to maybe play an extra 15 minutes of basketball so they can get a few more points than their buddy, and win for that week. And this was like 3 or 4 years ago. So it was just a really cool thing that we built with WordPress that I had never seen anything like that. And when you showed people, I remember I actually showed Matt Mullenweg, and we're like clicking around the iPad, like, oh yeah, look what it can do. And he's like, okay, what is this? He's like, he actually said, what does this have to do with WordPress? We're like, it is WordPress. Like, I forgot to lead in with that. So he was like, why are you showing me an iPad app?
Right.
And I was like, this whole thing is WordPress. It's just, you're looking at a theme, And then when he knew that, he was pretty blown away. So we've done some other interesting things. We did something with the Dallas Museum of Art that was kind of similar in terms of like looking at different art and stuff. But really kind of pushing those boundaries, man. That's what gets us fired up, and I think that's one thing that makes us stand out, because we have a nice portfolio of things that we've done that are kind of outside the box like that. Yeah. We like to work with partners that are
in the the YMCA project you were referring to. Matt referenced that right during State of the Word. Was it 13 or 14?
Yeah, it was 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah, he showed a video. I don't remember if he showed the YMCA or the Dallas Museum of Art, but he showed one of the videos where people were kind of scanning their card and logging in. And it was just WordPress with the theme and a simple app wrapper to make it load up on the iPad, and that was it. So it's
really cool.
That's one thing. I think we like to kind of go outside the box. We like to build really cool stuff. I think that's the one thing that probably sets us apart.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
So, Brad, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about what the kind of stuff that you specifically get to do at WebDev. Do you ever get to write code anymore? What other things kind of occupy your time?
No, not really. I don't get to write that much code these days. I mean, it's something I kind of sat down and came to terms with myself a couple years ago. Like, if you keep growing this company, you got to make a decision. Like, if you want to be a coder, you can't really be sitting at the admin level of a company or CEO. There's very important things that I have to do that don't allow me to have enough time to do that. So when I code, it's by contributing. Contributing, releasing plugins, working on plugins, contributing to WordPress or BuddyPress Core, things like that. In my spare time. So that's how I get a code is kind of in my spare time for fun. Most of my day, I'm running the show in terms of the admin side of things. Myself and Lisa do a lot of the client intakes, so new leads, which I really enjoy to do because I like to talk to people about their projects and how we can help and learn about what they're trying to build or what issues they've had and kind of talk about what we can bring to the table to help them, which I've always enjoyed doing that. I think I've always been pretty good at that, so I still do that, work with a lot of new leads and build out, proposals and SOWs and try to land, work on landing projects. And just making sure the health of the company is in a good spot on the financial side of things, which is the really boring stuff. But you got to make sure you have money in the bank. Dealing with whatever else might pop up in the middle of the day. I'm also I try to stay pretty active on the projects that that I work to bring in. I want to make sure I don't just bring them in and disappear. So we do what we call an account exec role. So whoever kind of brings in the project is the account exec. And that means I'm not in the day-to-day of the project, but I'm involved in terms of being on the calls and making sure everything's running smoothly and the client's happy. And if they're not happy, then we can have conversations about what we can do to fix that. So that's my day-to-day. There's a lot of admin, a lot of phone calls, a lot of meetings, and then if I'm lucky, in the evenings or weekends, I'll get to spend some time coding.
That's pretty cool. I could totally understand that, and right on. So you've got a really, really good team of people there at WebDev Studios. A couple of people have already been guests on our show, which we talked about recently. You've got some really, really great people there. WebDev Studios is kind of like a just team of absolute rock stars and a lot of people that I look up to. What do you think are the big factors when it comes to running a company that attracts those kind of people? The people who've got the skills, who are just really, really good at what they do, the kind of people that you want working for you. How do you attract them or make your business attractive to them, make them say, I want to work there, I want to work for Brad?
Yeah, it's not something I think we consciously did early on. We just kind of were like we just want to build cool sites, right? That was really kind of our business model, build cool sites, I guess. So I think it's just kind of by showing through example, right? So, kind of going back to those blog posts, we love to promote our team because our team is amazing, like you said. I mean, I'm blown away every day by the things our team does, and that's what excites me coming into work, because I get to hang out with these people that are all way smarter than me, and learn from them, and just look at some of the things they're learning and look at where they've come from a year ago when they started with us to where they're at now, or however long. Look at their growth. We like to hire very passionate people, curious people. People that want to just keep learning, because you have to, right? In this industry, it's technology. If you're not learning and always looking ahead, you're going to get passed pretty quickly. So we're always hiring very curious people that want to kind of dig in and play with new technologies and see what they can, do. We really like to promote our team, through blog posts, through Twitter, through whatever we can. We like to they're the stars of the company, So I think, whether that helps, I think it might. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But, we don't try to hide our company and just show off the execs. We want our employees to be front and center. We're very big about contributing back. I mean, WordPress is the reason we all have the lifestyle that we have. It's what we get to do what we want to do every day by working on WordPress. So it'd be foolish for us not to contribute back. So we've committed to 5 for the future. So we dedicate 5% of company time for the entire company to contributing to WordPress. So WordPress, something to do with the WordPress project. Doesn't have to be code, obviously. Support forums, WordPress, BuddyPress, organizing a meetup, speaking at an event, whatever it may be, releasing plugins, working on plugin updates, releasing those, documentation, whatever they want to do that excites them, we allow them to do that. And we actually I need to write a blog post about this, because we have actually figured out the absolute best way to do this. We used to always do it on Friday afternoon. That makes sense, right? Like Friday is usually a slower day. People are checking out early. It's a little bit quieter. So Friday afternoon was our contribution time. But we learned that the first thing to get punted every week when there's something that didn't get done in time was contribution time, because it's not a necessity to making our clients happy, right? So we actually switched that up, and now we start the week. So the first 2 hours on Monday for the entire company are spent contributing to WordPress. And it works really, really well because our team's super excited to come into work. They get to come into work and work on a project, whether it's a plugin or whatever. They get to work on whatever they want to do around WordPress for the first 2 hours of the day. And it gives us time to kind of get the plan for the week ready to go, right? We can get the schedules and everything ready to go, and then we officially kick off work at 11 o'clock on Monday. And that's worked really well. I want to write a blog post kind of detailing that because I think some other companies could learn and benefit from giving that a shot with that scheduling. Yeah, man, we're just doing cool stuff, and I think people gravitate towards that. I think if you look at some of the bigger agencies, there's very obvious differences between each one of us in terms of how we work, in terms of how we hire, type of projects we do. If you look into it, we're all a little bit different, and I think people just gravitate towards the assuming they want to go to like an agency, a larger agency, they gravitate towards the one that makes the most sense for them.
That's awesome. Sounds great. I would like to kind of move on to Dradcast for a moment, or not necessarily Dradcast, but podcasting in general, and how you got into it, and how and why you switched from WP Late Night to Dradcast.
Yeah. I love podcasting. I got into it. It's been a while now. Man, I don't even remember what year. I actually think it was around the time I moved. So I think it was 2008. I was on SitePoint, if you're familiar with SitePoint. Big kind of web developer resource if you're not familiar with it. Been around forever. I learned to code pretty much on SitePoint forums back in like the early 2000s. But I ended up becoming a moderator on the forums over just being there for so long and kind of helping people out. And I brought up the idea of, hey, why don't we make a SitePoint podcast? I was just kind of dabbling with it. Like I had recorded a couple just recordings with my buddies, like in their garage, like, not anything official, just to kind of play around with it. I was really into like, Twit TV and all the podcasts that we've all kind of grown up on and loved. And I was like, man, this would be fun. Like, let's just try it. So we ended up doing the SitePoint podcast. It was about a year in the making to get the show going, but we finally got it going, and I did that for like 3 years. We recorded every week. There's 4 of us. Actually, one of the guys was in Sydney, Australia, so that was crazy. So we'd be recording like right now, and it would be like 10 a.m. the next day for him. He got tired of the whole what's going on in the future joke pretty quickly, but so I just fell in love with it. Like, it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I like to geek out and just talk about technology as much as I can. I mean, it's a lot of fun, and I think that's really what's driven me to do all the podcasting, because we're just sitting here geeking out over technology, right? So after doing SitePoint for about 3 years, I kind of decided to take a step back and let somebody else have a shot at it. I was getting pretty hardcore into WordPress, obviously. So we were talking about just kind of everything in the web, right? And that's when I started thinking, I think it would make sense to do something a little more focused for me, like WordPress related. And then Dre and I came up with the original idea for WP Late Night, and at a WordCamp after party, because it's exactly what we wanted to do. We were like, what if we just like literally had a podcast where we had a few beers and just talked about WordPress? That would be cool, right? So we ended up talking with Ryan Emmel over at WP Candy and launched the show on WP Candy as WP Late Night. I think we did 30-some episodes or so. I don't know. It lasted about a year. But that was the precursor to Dradcast. I mean, we ended that show. WP Candy was kind of a sinking ship, and we bailed, and that kind of all went down in flames. And then, but Dre and I both really loved what we were doing, so we're kind of going back and forth, like, what do we do next? Let's do another show. And then that's when we came up with the idea for the Dradcast. We're like, rather than, because Ryan was kind of always that one that kept us on track. He was like kind of the main host, and Dre and I were just the idiots on the background, So we kind of knew, like, if it's just me and you, like, I don't know how smooth this is going to go. So then we were thinking about getting a third host, and then we came up with the idea of, well, why don't we let the guest be the host, right? So each week, whoever the guest is, it's their show, right? They're the host. We're just there to make them look good by looking stupid, which we're very, very good at. So, and that's it. I mean, so now we just get together. We put a more regimented format. We kind of learned over time that people liked formalities around, at least understanding, like, all right, is this an hour show or a 2 hour or a half hour? Like, what am I committing to here when they listen to a show? WP Late Night, some shows were 45 minutes, some shows were 2.5 hours. It was just insane. So we were like, it's going to be an hour. We're going to have these segments. We had kind of a schedule that so people know, like, all right, what to expect in any given show. And yeah, we've been doing that. This is our 3rd year. We have, I don't know, 70 some shows, I think. But it's great. It's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's awesome. We love the Dradcast, actually, and it's a big inspiration. I mean, it was inspiration for me in a lot of ways. I was listening to it since pretty early on, and it's been probably, I don't know, my favorite for a long time, just about as long as it's been going on. It's just a great show, great format, always great guests, and definitely we were very inspired putting together the roundtable show by the Dradcast.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I love the feedback. Honestly, I think that's one of the reasons we still do it. Like, it's fun to do. We still enjoy it, but man, when we hear that, or like we go to like a WordCamp and everyone's like, yeah, Dradcast, you know, and man, we were at like a WordCamp Europe like a couple of years ago, and they did one of those lock-ins at a bar. Like, I didn't even know about this until we were there, where they just like, if there's enough of you and it's like closing time, they'll just lock the doors and like keep going, right? So that happens. So like 4 in the morning, it's like all work-campers at this bar, and there's like a whole table of people like chanting Drad and wanting us to come in and do our show like after a lot of drinks. But it was fun, man. It's just to hear the feedback and to hear that people really enjoy it. That's definitely what keeps us going.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it's really remarkable. Maybe it's something about that informal format that's really nice. Just this unscripted conversation with people who've been doing a lot of things in the space. I have a lot of knowledge and get along real well. It's just an entertaining experience for listeners and viewers, and informative at the same time. So I really like it. I guess I would love to hear what other things you would say to those in this growing landscape of WordPress users and abusers. What would you say to those who are considering the thought of starting their own podcast talking about WordPress?
I say do it. I mean, honestly, it's funny because they really come in waves. So I've been doing a WordPress podcast for probably, I don't know, 4 years, maybe a little bit longer. And in my books, I always have the last chapter is kind of like a resources section. And since the first version, I've had WordPress podcasts. You know, and I just kind of go based on what podcasts are going at the time. And for this last edition, I thought it'd be fun, so I actually wrote a blog post. So I'll get you a link for the show notes. But I wrote a blog post comparing what podcasts were in the 3 editions that I wrote about and the time frame. And basically, the only podcast that's still active that were in the first 2 is WordPress Weekly, and it was in the first and the third. So the only one from the first 2 that's still active is WordPress Weekly, even though there was a bit of a hiatus there. So, but there's been, I think I have at least 10 plus or so that have since been canceled. You know, they went for a year or whatever, and then they just stopped. So they come and go. But I mean, I think there's, I mean, WordPress is huge, right? Like, how many tens of millions of users that we know about? It powers like all the internet. It's huge, so why not have more people talk about it? It's the same about writing content. Like, I think there should be way more sites writing, you know, awesome content about WordPress, you know, like Post Status, you know, those type of sites. There's not that many anymore. You got WP Tavern and Post Status are probably the 2 biggest, but there just aren't that many, and I think it's a huge space. I think just people kind of go into it expecting too much out of it. Podcasting, people go in thinking they're going to make tons of money doing it, and that's probably not the right reason to be doing it. Same with writing sites. They're like, oh, I want to do this and make some money at doing it through ads and stuff. Like, look, put a game plan together, build an audience. Yeah, you can probably make some money. Krogstar's doing an amazing job because he built a community and people want to support him. So he's doing it full time and he's making good money, and it's only going to get better because people want to support him. So I say do it, man. Get it out there, release it. Even if you have no listeners. I mean, Dradcast, we have like 2 listeners. You and Dre's mom, I think. So, yeah, it's like, who cares? Like, just do it. Just release it. Just throw it out there. Get it out there. Throw it on iTunes. People will listen, and you'll have fun doing it. And you'll learn a lot.
I got one quick question, slightly off topic, but you keep bringing it up. Can you tell us a little bit about writing the books? Just
Yeah.
whatever you want to tell us in a quick time.
It sucks. It sucks. No, but really, it sucks. No, it's a lot of work. So, it's doing it is a lot lot of work, and you're kind of like, oh, why did I do this again? But then when it's done and you get a copy of it, and you find out and you hear and read reviews that it is actually helping people. I mean, that's what makes it all worth it. It's a lot of work. You don't really make much money off it. People think you make like tens of thousands of dollars. I can promise you, you don't. I think the first book, the first edition, I ended up making. Hey, there's a good one. That's the best book. The plugin book.
Yeah, it's not a signed copy though, so.
Man, you got to bring it out. I'll sign it for sure. Yeah, the first edition, I think I made less than $1.50 an hour. You know, I figured it out. I think maybe it's like $1.25 an hour from time spent on it. But so don't do it to make money because you're not. But what you will do, I kind of always joke that the best way I learn about WordPress is to write a book about it because that first book, there were things I was writing about that I didn't at the time. I was like, all right, so I got to write on this topic, and I have no idea. I don't know anything about that topic, right? I know nothing. So I had to spend tons of time doing research and digging into code and getting it right because it's not a, or it's a factual book, right? You're giving people facts on how to do stuff. It has to be right. So spent a lot of time on the first one just learning some topics that I actually didn't even know. And luckily I got them right, and it did very, very well. I think the reason I enjoy it is because there's a lot more books in the landscape right now, but I still think that the Professional WordPress series is the best book if you're looking to take that jump into more of an advanced side of things. You know, if you're looking to get into the code. I don't think there's another book that matches it in terms of the information and knowledge. And people should know that if they're reading it, like it's not just people writing the books who try to make a buck that you're like, who is this person? Like it's people that are living and breathing WordPress for their jobs, you know. So I want to make, you know, this book is a reputation to me. So the last thing I want to do is put something out there that's garbage. I want to make sure it's as good as it can be, as easy to understand, but that can teach people because these references just didn't exist when I was learning WordPress. So. You know, is this information online? Sure it is, but you're going to have to dig and dig and dig and dig to get it all into one spot because it's all over the place. And something you're reading on a blog post from a year ago might already be out of date. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. You know, the codex, sometimes it's right, sometimes it's not. Like everything you read online, you got to take a bit with a grain of salt. And that's not to say this book is going to be perfect for years to come. It certainly won't be. But, you know, we put in the time up front and had the people vet it and kind of review it to make sure what we're saying is as good as it can be. So I enjoy it. I know a lot of people that have done books that they do one, they're like, I'll never do it again. But I enjoy doing it. It's fun. I get a thrill when I get a copy, and it's great you meet a new client, you can hand them a book instead of a business card. That usually goes a long way.
So you're saying if I commit to writing a book, I'll finally figure out what this HTML thing everybody's talking about is all about.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, you better. You may not sell very many.
Brad, I'm curious. I just brushed over a little bit, but humor me. I'm curious, like what was going on for you professionally and in the WordPress space and in your mind when you said WordPress world needs books about doing WordPress professionally, and I'm the guy to write it.
Yeah, well, first was probably doubt, like, man, am I a guy to write this? Like, I don't know, but it's funny. It all stemmed from Matt Mullenweg. He put a post on his blog saying, hey, so-and-so over at Wiley's looking for authors for WordPress. If you're interested, here's our email. That was it. And it's, I don't know, this is probably back in 2009. It's on his blog. And I was like, oh, yeah. I was kind of thinking about it. I was like, well, that might be interesting. I knew Lisa Sabin Wilson at the time, just as a friend, so I knew a little bit about kind of that world. But I'm not, you know, I'm not a writer per se. I have a blog, but it doesn't mean I know how to write, right? You know, I wasn't great at English in school. Don't tell my mom because she's an English teacher. Although I had my mom as an English teacher, that's a whole other story. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of like, you know, I decided, you know, I was like, I'll do this. I want to do this. And it was really just kind of throwing my name out there and saying, look, this is who I am. Here's a blog I've been doing for a number of years around tech. You know, I have a company around WordPress, but nobody knew, they didn't know who I was. Nobody knew who I was at the time. So I'm very, very lucky that they decided to pick me because I think they had over 100 submissions, is what she told me later on. So I think it was just a lot of luck, like good timing and luck, that I got my foot in the door, and then did the first book. And once you have one, and it does fairly well, then that opens up a lot of opportunities to do, additional books or additional, updated additions down the road. So
that's awesome, Brad. I think it lends a lot of credibility too when you go to the WebDev site and you have all the books lined up at the bottom, right?
Yeah,
any perspective,
it does look cool.
Any prospective clients are like, oh, all right, I guess
that's probably one more thing that sets us apart, because we got Lisa Staben Wilson, who's the For Dummies brand author. So if it's WordPress for Dummies anything, it's hers. She's written over 10 books now for them. And Brian Messlinger just came out with a book end of last year around building web apps with WordPress. So so all the partners have published books around WordPress. So yeah, that's probably another thing that helps us stand out a little bit.
Yeah, that's awesome. So really quick, one last note on the books. That is just differentiating Professional WordPress from Professional WordPress plugin development. One of the Professional WordPress, I was just browsing on Amazon, it has a January 2015 date. Was that refreshed really recently?
Yep. So that is so that's Professional WordPress. It's the 3rd edition.
Okay.
So generally, what they like about a 2-year shelf life is what they want. Obviously, open source, it would be awesome to roll one out every year, but even that can be a little quick. To roll out an update in print form. Like if you're doing an ebook, sure, that probably makes sense, but in print form, it doesn't. It is the 3rd edition, and essentially, what they want is you to update about a third of the book. But obviously, we're going to update everything that needs updated. So basically, going through, update everything. Looking for any deprecated functions, any new functions or hooks or filters or anything we want to talk about. Make sure we get in there. We have a couple new chapters in there. So we the last 2 editions, both times we've added 2 new chapters, like remove 2, add 2. And that's really based on kind of the marketplace that we're in now. So like one of the 2 chapters you added, one's on data migration and one's on WordPress as an application framework. Mm-hmm. So the application framework is a much more topical item than it was 3 or 4 years ago. So we want to get something a little fresher in there. So yeah, it's just really going through and making sure that it's all as current and as up to date as possible.
Cool. I remember seeing a tweet of yours a while ago. You were just kind of polling, folks to see how much interest there was in doing a new edition of the plugin development book too. Is that underway? I hope. Are there plans?
Yeah. So funny you say that. I haven't officially said anything publicly, but we are in the very early stages of working on the plan for the 2nd edition. I get asked about that at every WordCamp, and everyone seems to like it. I really enjoyed writing it because, again, I think it was a book that needed to be written, like one definitive resource on plugins. And believe it or not, it's like 4 years old. So, as you can imagine, a lot of the information in it's still good. I'm sure there are some things that could be updated for sure, but it's really just kind of missing stuff, like new things, like the Heartbeat API, new items, new APIs are in WordPress that just weren't there at the time. So we are actively working on that plan, and I'm hoping that we'll have something out towards the end of the year or early next year at the latest.
Gotcha. Cool. Thanks. All right, I'm going to shift gears really quick, and I wanted to get in at least a question or 2 about AppPresser. Yeah. When AppPresser first came out, I thought it was such a cool thing for folks at home tuning in, for joining us at home. AppPresser essentially lets you have WordPress powered sites, but also use the mobile device's native hardware to do lots of things that you wouldn't otherwise have been able to do. And it's an actual app in the App Store or the Android or Google Play, I should say, marketplace that users can download and use. So I wanted to ask you 1 or 2 things about that. One is, what's the story behind Reactor? Is that an offshoot or other functionality to AppPresser? And why did you choose to break that out? Mm-hmm. What's the story with that? I guess I'll pause there real quick and let you answer that one.
Yeah. So AppPresser was kind of the first product we rolled out with. And it's actually the first real premium product outside of a few extensions for like WooCommerce and EDD that we've done. And it's the AppPresser, which is kind of version 1, is essentially the idea of having building a mobile app that is powered by WordPress that runs on iOS and Android. Mm-hmm. The way you do that is through installing various plugins that expose that hook into WordPress, and then also kind of expose those native functionality of phones through PhoneGap. So PhoneGap's an open source project that essentially allows you to write iOS and Android and Windows phone apps using tools you already know, like JavaScript and HTML. You can interact with those device features like the camera or the GPS location or the accelerometer, things like that. So we built AppPresser, and it's a really cool product. The challenge and a lot of the feedback that we got is it's a bit advanced. Someone that has maybe a WooCommerce store that just kind of purchased the theme and a couple extensions and did a lot of point-and-click configuration, they're going to have a hard time setting up AppPresser because it's not so much building the app around your site. It's the whole process of taking that and using PhoneGap build to get the files that you need to submit to Apple and iOS or Apple and Android, and then kind of going down the path of submission. So it's a bit clunky in terms of that process. Now, the more advanced users love it because it gives them the flexibility. If you can get into the code, you can do pretty much whatever you want through the hooks and stuff that are available. So they love it. But we wanted to also bring something to the market that the more novice user could work with, and that's where Reactor came to be. So Reactor is essentially an app builder for WordPress. Reactor is a completely different system built from the ground up, and I think what the coolest thing about Reactor, which I love, is it's completely powered through the WordPress REST API. So this is, there are some commercial products out there. In my opinion, this is one of the neatest that we've seen so far that is fully built on the WordPress REST API. So you actually use our builder to build your app. It's got a nice little visual display. All you have to do is install the REST API plugin if you don't have it, and eventually that will be in core, so you won't even have to do that. And then it just brings in your content through the API. Which is great. So you can kind of build out your app, the different layouts, what kind of content you want, what other app features you want to kind of hook into it. And then when you're ready, you click one button, and it will actually go out to the PhoneGap API and build it for you automatically in the background. Then come back and just give you a QR code that you can scan with your phone that will install it automatically on your phone, so you can test it out. And then when you're ready to submit it, you already have the files, so you still have to go through that process. But we do have support to help do that if you need it. So it's more of a novice builder, but long term, I think Reactor is probably going to be the future of AppPresser, just because it is working with the REST API. It's working with the more modern technologies. We're using the Ionic framework as well on that. So it's really cool. If you haven't done it, check it out. It's reactor.apppresser.com, and there's a free. It is a paid service, but there's a free 30 days. So you can go on there and build your apps and play around with it and see if it's something you want to pay for. The biggest benefit to Reactor is really fixing some limitations we have on the AppPresser side, things like offline viewing. To be able to do that on your own site where you have plugins installed, we'd essentially have to cache your entire site down to the app. That's really the only way to do it. Whereas on the Reactor side of things, via the API, we can actually pre-cache some stuff, but not have to essentially cache all of WordPress. And it also has push notifications built right in. So if you want to send a push notification, you log into the portal, and it's literally a CPT. You type in the title and the body of the push notification, hit send, and it will blast out to everybody that has your app installed. So it's a pretty neat service. We're putting a lot of effort into the underlying technology of it and rolling out new features on a weekly basis. Yeah. So check it out. It's free to play with. So
that's so cool, and so empowering to folks who want to have a write it in one spot and have it in multiple spots without constantly paying, developers for iOS and Android and whatever site developer they're working with as well.
So, I mean, you can save a lot of money, and I think it also works with WooCommerce. So on the e-commerce side of the house, I mean, our prices I think start at like $50 a month. $50 a month to have an iOS and Android app where people can actually buy products from you. I think it's pretty minimal. So it's exciting. People are really liking it. We're getting some really good feedback. It's been a fun ride, kind of playing in we have some history with the app, so this is kind of formalizing it and bringing that technology to the public so they can use it.
Very cool.
I guess we're kind of running out of time, and so as my initiation, I get to bring up some of the wrap-up questions here. And
right.
One of the questions that is on everybody's mind, I'm sure, is where do we get to see you around in the community coming up through the rest of the year?
Sure. So I'm a co-organizer for WordCamp Philly, which is going to be June 13th and 14th this year. And let me just make sure I have that date right. I'm pretty sure it is, but that would be terrible if I said it wrong.
Put it on your own calendar, right?
Yeah, I probably should. I'm pretty sure it's 13th and 14th of June. So I will definitely be there. Obviously, I'm an organizer. Probably won't be speaking, but I'll be around all day, just making sure the event's running smoothly. Yeah, this 13th, 14th. So that's actually the next one on my radar. And then beyond that, I don't have any other plans. I want to go to WordCamp USA if that ever happens. That would be awesome. I generally go to WordCamp Baltimore. A lot of the other camps I hit are in the fall. So you got like Baltimore, you got New York City, Boston. I keep an eye on anything because I'm in Philly, so anything on the west or the East Coast is pretty easy for me to get to. So I will probably be at those as well. Whenever actually I can't. Boston's already out there, isn't it? But Baltimore and is not. And New York's on Halloween, which that sounds like a pretty fun time. New York City on Halloween night. Nothing bad will happen there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. That sounds like a good, clean, blank slate of a calendar. So if things come up, you might
follow me on Twitter. It's right here on my shirt, Williams BA, and I'm sure I'll tweet about it wherever I'm going.
Yeah. And I imagine you participate in the local meetup. So if anybody's in the Philly area, they might see you there.
Yeah, for sure. If you're in the Philly area, we have 2 meetups off, which is actually awesome. So we have the Philly official kind of meetup, which is we go downtown, and then we have a Philly Burbs meetup, which actually bounces around to different locations in the suburbs. Both separate groups, but obviously we get a lot of overlap. Both really great, really great groups. So if you're in the area, definitely check us out.
That's great. So, all right, Brad. Another wrap-up question we got to ask everybody is, who are some guests that you would recommend that we have on the show in the future?
Well, you definitely don't want my better half Dre on here. He's not that good. Let's see. Lisa Sabin Wilson would be a great one. I think you said you haven't had her on. She's amazing. She's done. She's someone that I really looked up to getting into the community before I knew her. And then when I met her, I looked up to her even more because she's just a really genuine person, really nice person, extremely smart. So I think she would be an awesome guest for you to have.
It's a good suggestion. Thank you. We'll make that happen. All right, so we are pretty much out of time, which is just so unfortunate. There were whole topics that we wanted to talk about. We had a series of questions on that we didn't even get to touch. It's most unfortunate.
Next time. You can have me on episode 102.
You will be, yeah. You're on the list of people who I immediately need to ask to schedule again, because that would be great to talk about all those other things.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, is there anything that you would like to share with anybody that we forgot to talk about, or anything topical at this time that you'd like to promote or share, or just how people can contact you?
Twitter, WilliamsBA. That's usually the quickest way to get a hold of me. Check out the Dradcast. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern on Dradcast.com. And yeah, I guess that's about it. Thanks for having me. I definitely was glad to finally make it. Questions weren't too difficult. You didn't grill me that hard, so.
We'll try to do your next time.
Thank you for being on, Brad. We appreciate it.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Brad.
keep it up. I've been going through older episodes, and you guys are doing some really good stuff, so I'm enjoying it. Now it's like finding a show, and I bet you, Kyle, in San Francisco over the summer. So I think that's when I first learned about you guys, and then it's like finding a show that has like 7 seasons, right? And you're just like, yeah, I got lots of content to go back and listen to. So I got about five under my belt, but I've been going back.
We're on Netflix too, if you want to binge watch.
All right. Just auto goes to the next episode. My wife will love that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Well, thanks a ton, Brad. We really appreciate having you on the show. Thanks a lot. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep rocking out with the Dradcast and everything else, and don't ever find a cure for that WordPress sickness.
I won't.
Thanks,
Thanks, guys.
Brad.
Thank you.